So today I am joined by Chandler Carter as part of Marshall Opera's Oral History Project. I'm so excited to take the time to interview you and definitely more excited to sing your music. So I'm going to read a little bit from your bio before jumping in and asking you some questions. Um, and I loved the opening line of your bio, so I might just read more than that. But um, so Chandler Carter is devoted to themes of social justice and the artist's vision. Carter's work focuses on historical stories that cross over boundaries of race and power. His early song cycles, Shouts, Faces, Cities, and Lonely Roads, evokes the images and aspirations of the civil rights era. In October of 2022, the Santa Fe Opera premiered his and librettist Diana Solomon Glover's This Little Light of Mine, based on the life of civil rights activist Fannie Lou Hamer. And in 2015, the Center for Contemporary Opera showcases opera in progress Bobby, based on the life of Robert Kennedy. He wrote the words and music for No Easy Walk to Freedom, based on the life of Nelson Mandela, and his opera Strange Fruit, based on the tragic novel by Lillian Smith and libretto by Joan Ross Sorkin, was showcased in the New York City Opera's Vox series and opened Longleaf Opera's 2007 inaugural summer festival. In addition to his multiple operatic works, Carter has composed over 50 songs, numerous choral chamber and orchestral works, which have been performed internationally by distinguished recitalists, choirs, and ensembles. Carter has also received several awards, including grants from the National Endowment for the Arts. On top of all of this composition, Carter is a professor of music and head of composition at Hofstra University. Also a respected scholar, his book, The Last Opera, The Rake's Progress in the Life of Stravinsky, and Sung Drama was published by Indiana University Press in 2019, and he is currently, possibly, maybe done, writing a textbook, Stories in Sound Through Time, Music as a Cultural Act. That is already an amazing wealth of work. So I would love to start by asking, how did you get your start in music and composing? We'll start from the beginning.
Well, I went to majored in music at the University of North Carolina as a singer. I got a
Oh,
B I got a BA in voice. I knew I was interested in one day maybe composing, but I was shy to start composing. I really didn't have any idea how to begin.
yeah.
I I thought, I need to study harmony and theory and do all of that stuff. And I put my toe in the water eventually. By my junior and senior year, I started composing a little bit, taking some lessons, but I was by no means, uh, I was just barely getting started. So I got a master's in voice and in composition from Boston University. And one reason I went to BU is because they gave degrees in both. They allowed you to get
Mm,
a master's in both. Very few schools you could get two masters.
yeah, amazing.
Um, and I was still wanted to commit myself as a singer, though I knew in my heart of hearts that I didn't have the drive to perform.
Mm,
A performer has to really just have, you know, really love performing. I enjoyed performing. I enjoyed performing music that I loved, but I didn't live to do it.
yeah,
But I really enjoyed composing, and over the as I got more practice at it and I got more comfortable at it, I realized and also I loved the universities. I loved, even as an undergraduate, I knew that I wanted to be a
mm,
professor of some. I just liked the environment of the university. So one way or the other, and it was pretty clear that, and I was good at theory. I enjoyed teaching it. That's so that was my day gig
yeah,
but that allows me to compose. And so I just plugged away at it. And as far as opera is concerned, I wrote, as a singer, I was drawn to songs. So I wrote
yeah,
songs. And they became increasingly dramatic. I felt like I had, and I enjoyed opera, though I came late to it. And I was married at the time to a very successful opera singer, Victoria Livengood. And so um, I got an inside look into that world, and I knew I
Mhm.
wouldn't make it as a singer in that world, but I was fascinated by what they were doing
Yeah.
and the drama.
Oh, of
And
course.
at BU, I was, you know, I majored in I majored in voice and composition, but I tell you, as a now I pretty much write exclusively opera. I have to say, I learned more at BU from the director of opera theater, John Haber, rest his soul. Um, he was taken by AIDS in the late '80s.
Mm.
He was a brilliant, crazy director. Um, but I learned an enormous amount from him just about drama, um, and how to act on stage, but also the construction of drama. How do you construct performances? And I noticed you're a stage director. That I was very much drawn. I love that you're that must as a singer and a stage director. Those are very that as a singer and a composer, I you learn you I felt like I have a little leg up on opera composers because I know what feels like to sing on stage.
I would
Um,
imagine so, yeah.
um, and I imagine as if you're in singing and your stage directing inform one another.
Oh my gosh, I feel like by doing anytime I direct, I feel like that informs my singing, and every time I sing, I feel like that informs my directing. It's just different sides of the coin, but they're both storytelling. It's
Right,
just
absolutely.
what perspective are you taking? Yeah.
So that kind of storytelling, that's all I'm interested in. And over time, I devoted myself entirely to that. I
Yeah.
felt, I could do other things and com- compose other pieces and pursue that. But what I really want to do is tell stories and dramas, and that's opera. And luckily,
Amazing. That is
the
opera
world
to the hilt.
Yes, and luckily the world of opera has, in my time, decades now, has it's we're in a kind of a flourishing of American opera has really grown immensely.
Yeah.
Opportunities, more opportunities than there ever have been, and the opera world is, I mean, it's still difficult, but there's a lot of opportunities. So
Amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. My second question was about opera specifically, so we covered that.
yeah.
Um, and like you said, you've been in the game and the and composing for opera world for a while. And what I loved about the first opening line of your bio was that many of your artistic creations prominently feature historical stories of social justice. So I would love for you to talk to me about how and why social justice came to be a key theme in your creative storytelling process. It feels like you were way ahead of the game on that. I know a lot of people are doing that today, but you have been focused on those stories for a couple decades.
I never thought of myself as ahead of the game on that. I mean, I felt like I was with the times always,
Mm.
but um, you know, I made in college, I'm always interested in more than one thing. So when I was an undergrad, I got a BA and also in political science.
Mm.
And one of my favorite political science professors was a poet. Now, back then, he and I maintained contact over the years. And he said back then they they loved the idea that he was a political science professor, but also a poet,
Mm.
had a creative imagination. He said nowadays that wouldn't go over so well. They wouldn't be that interested in it, but I loved that. And people always used to joke, "Well, how are you going to combine those two?" It's one reason I majored in political science. I was interested in politics, and I thought maybe I'd go to law school.
Mm.
Because my mother didn't want me to major in music, and then that interest, that was never an interest really, and so that just kind of dissipated, but my interest in politics was always there.
Yeah.
And um, I didn't know how I would combine them in any way, except that they were just combined in my interests. So,
Mm.
and of course, there's plenty of great politics. A good political story makes for a great opera,
Great
like
drama. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and all those grand operas of the early 19th century. So yeah, they make for great stories,
Mm.
and they're a lot. So, and the first opera I wrote was based on the life of Nelson Mandela, and my close friend Andre Solomon Glover, who was then the husband of my dear
Mm.
friend the librettist and collaborator, Diana Solomon Glover, also a great singer herself.
Mm.
So I was close with them, and I'd written that song cycle, Shouts, Faces, Cities, and Lonely Roads, which, by the way, the poet was my political science professor from
I was
college.
going to ask if you ever
So,
studied his
yeah, oh,
poetry. Okay,
absolutely. He
amazing.
was one of the first poets I set.
Yeah.
And right away, I was drawn to, um, those songs were about the civil rights movement. And Andre encouraged me to write for him, and he premiered them at American Concert Hall in 1990. And at that time, I got the idea of maybe writing a monodrama about Mandela. Mandela was released from jail at that point, and had the efforts to overthrow apartheid had been well underway in America. That was, a part of that time. And so, and Andre said, if you write an opera of Nelson Mandela, I will sing it for you. So I said, you don't have to ask me twice. So over the years, and I'd never written an opera, and I studied with Thea Musgrave, who's a great,
Oh, yes. Oh, I
studied with
love her. I
grad
love
center.
her
She
stuff.
taught at Queens. She taught at Queens and at the CUNY Grad Center where I was getting my doctorate.
Okay.
So she encouraged me to try to write the libretto myself. She apparently she said, if you can possibly do it, write it yourself. It'll save you trouble. So
Mm.
I took her word for it. And so I worked on it myself, and I built, I started with his speeches. This was before he even had a good
Mm.
biography out.
Yeah.
And I just pieced it together and both scene by a scene here and a scene there, worked them out, and it came together. I mean, there's if I look back on it, and there's flaws to that work, but there's also some scenes that work very, very well. So I was
Mm.
really pleased with it,
Yeah.
and it was hard to get. It was, in fact, it's proved impossible to get an opera company to produce that. But Riverside Church, where I was a singer,
Yeah.
sang at the choir there, and Diana and Andre both sang at the choir there. And they, in the 90s, were very committed to doing interesting works for theater. They had a theater in the church, and they had a very ambitious choral director. They had money at
Mm.
that point.
Very important.
And they gave me money to produce the opera. And so
Incredible. Yeah.
we did the opera in the nave at Riverside Church. I don't recommend doing operas in the naves of churches, but
Yeah.
but it was a success, and so that kind of got me that it got some attention, and that kind of led to other opportunities. Even though I could never get a company to do it, it led to other opportunities and gave me confidence.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes that's all you need is a little boost of
yeah.
confidence that keeps you going. Yeah.
Yes, especially when you're doing something like writing an opera.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
something that's
A
like
massive endeavor
almost like
like
a
writing an
joke. When
opera.
people ask me, "What are you working on these days?" and I was like, "I'm writing an opera," and then and so that's it. Almost feels pretentious to say it, even if it is true.
Right. Right. I very much relate to that as well. So the aria that we chose is from your work in progress, The Whole World. Talk to me about that project and how it came to be. Is that something that
Yeah.
has just been on your mind?
Well, that one, boy, that one's that's Diana Solomon Glover and I. And Diana is like my sister from another mother. And by the way, Diana sang Winnie Mandela in the No Easy.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um, so um, Diana is a good writer, and she had done her own work, worked on a theater piece 20, 30 years, oh my God, it's 25 years ago, and Riverside produced that too. So I knew she was a writer. And I produced some Black History Month concerts at Hofstra, and I asked her to write script, kind of to script them,
Hmm.
and we developed themes and stuff. And so we did a lot. So I was very confident that in her as a writer and a dramatist, and understand as a singer herself, understanding. So she was the first person I contacted when I got the idea to do an opera about Fannie Lou Hamer. And then we entered a competition called Opera for All Voices, and that was sponsored by Santa Fe Opera and six other companies. Santa Fe took the lead, and it's basically their commission. So we got picked, and so that was a success. So that premiered in 2022, and we were like, we're got to keep this up. So we encountered a fabulous singer in a workshop at Kentucky Opera, who was just singing in the chorus. He was singing in the American Spiritual Ensemble, which was the chorus for our workshop for our opera. And I had been told ahead of time that there was this great singer, and there he was sitting right in the middle of the alto section. And oh my God, you could tell he was great. And then he took over from the lead singer when she went to the bathroom one day and took over her part. And man, what his name was Kimon Mara.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
So I said, yeah, I'm not, that guy's not, we're not letting him get away with just singing Handel and Rossini. I mean, I think he's done some other contemporary music, but I've told Diana we've got to write an opera for him. So
Mm,
I thought for about half a second about what role would be perfect for him. And what jumped into my mind was we need a type of RuPaul character.
yeah, yeah.
It's and he loved that idea. And as it turns out, I had it. So back to my so now this is a long story, by the way. So
Fine.
I went back to my early days in New York. I used to work at Padelson Music House. Have you ever heard of Padelson Music
I
House?
haven't, no.
Yeah. Ask your voice teacher. I bet
Okay.
no.
She probably will, yeah.
Oh yeah, they'll know because in the 20th century, that's where you went to order music. You either
Mm,
called up or when you were in New York, because they were right behind Carnegie Hall.
mm.
It's no longer there, but it had a great reputation. Had a great reputation for having rude clerks, of which I was one. But another rude clerk was a man named Nelson Sullivan, who was a very fascinating guy. He was a Southerner like me, and but he was immersed in the world of the music clubs and the downtown scene. And he actually was very close friends with RuPaul and other drag queens from the Atlanta scene.
Mm.
And then, in fact, RuPaul lived with him for when he first came to New York. That's where he lived until he got his own
Gosh.
thing. And so, but
Oh,
Nelson, um, I wanted to be a composer, but it wasn't working out for him. But he was very creative, and he loved. He was one of the first like self-styled videographers. He
mm,
basically, he's now his work is. He died, unfortunately. He died of a heart attack in
mm.
1989. But he essentially he's credited with inventing what we call now the video blog. So
Oh,
he
wow.
took video camera and turned it onto himself and started talking. And also, he was also kind of influenced by the world of Andy Warhol,
Ah,
of 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 just turning the camera on people
mhm,
and seeing what
mhm.
happened.
Yeah.
And so he videoed everything, and he had all these videos of New York club scene in the 1980s, of which RuPaul and many other very colorful characters are. And his death was really tragic. And
Mm,
I still, because he was a friend of mine, it was
yeah.
upsetting to me. But he as a person, his presence was always is stuck in the back of my head.
Mm,
His voice is still there. And of course, you can go now on YouTube and see any number of videos. And in
mm.
fact, you can feel like you're going out to lunch with him because he's turned the video and he's talking to you the whole time.
Wow.
So the opera really is focused on him, and
Yeah,
he's a central character. And the RuPaul figure, Diana is, so I sold Diana on this idea, and she
yeah.
has bought, and so that's what this opera is about. Um,
Mm,
it's really about that world, and the most important thing about that is it's not about any one of the single characters.
mm,
It's about how we turn cameras onto ourselves.
mhm.
So Nelson was working in the 80s with uh, portable cameras. When he first started using them, they were heavy. He even gave himself a hernia holding this thing. But by the late 80s, they became lighter and more compact, and you could
Yeah.
turn them on yourself. And of course, I realized in looking at them, I was like, this is now the world we live in. This is
Right.
we turn our cameras on. We're talking to ourselves on the camera. We're doing selfies. We're doing little
Yeah.
video blogs. Anybody can do it. We
Yeah.
do it everybody does it all the time.
Right.
And he was doing it well before, and he was also doing it with a group of people. I don't know how much you know about the club kids. There's a lot of fascinating, interesting, and mildly horrifying things that went on during that time. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but in any event, you got to see it all.
Wow.
And there, and it's also a type of, people that are kind of self-styled misfits.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
um, and they, and so they're all there on the video camera, and they it anticipates a lot of the things that I see in a culture of a younger generation. I mean, I'm a college professor, so I see them all the time.
Mm.
I see
That's true.
them coming
Yeah.
and going, and they remind me very much of people that are trying to create identities for themselves and
Mm. Hmm.
using cameras to do that. And so the club kids were doing this in the 80s, and Nelson was really, and so it's a fascinating story. So Diana is,
Wow.
so the lead character in this opera is the camera itself, and
Oh,
how it affects the people that it turns. So Luce's character, Luce is a fiery character,
yeah.
but
Yeah. Definitely.
Luce, but that's when the camera's on. When the camera's, Diana and I haven't really crafted the entire story,
Mm.
but Luce might actually be quite shy and um, off camera.
Hmm.
So there's a major contrast. So where the characters are all putting on an
For the
active
camera.
putting on masks,
Mm.
putting on characters. Um, so that's what that opera is about.
That is
It's
so
about,
fascinating. Wow.
yeah,
I love that
it's about a
idea.
world, and of which
Right.
the RuPaul character, or they're all fictionalized too, so it's not
Yeah.
actually RuPaul.
Right.
And
Right.
her character is, I we didn't have her character wasn't very well developed. She was going to be there was a person, a close friend of Nelson's, who was a very soft spoken and shy, sweet
Mm.
young woman.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, well that'll be the loose character.
Yeah.
And then last fall, Sinead O'Connor died, and I
Mm.
remembered then her impact and around the same time, and I thought, no, she's not going to be shy. She's going to be aggressive and
Fiery.
in this world fiery.
Yeah.
And so we was like, oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Because we wanted somebody that the character didn't have much character to her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, and I thought, well, Sinead, if we're writing a piece about the culture of the 1980s,
Right.
then Sinead O'Connor is absolutely, she with RuPaul is foreground in
Right.
that.
So
And
this leads right into my
it's
next
self-styled
question
mist.
about
Yeah.
choosing source material. So either historic events or figures. You've done this in
Mhm.
a lot of your operas. What do you
Mhm.
look for that will translate well to the operatic stage?
Um, People that are just absolutely passionate about what they're sing. In
Mm.
order to sing, they have to be absolutely passionate about.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I've got to have people that have big emotions.
Mm.
I I I get very bored to the point of rolling my eyes. It's a good thing that the lights are off when I'm watching. When characters have to sing things that are kind of pedestrian. Um,
Mm.
Sometimes, of course, you have to do something that's kind of pedestrian, but it's like, okay, then just say it. Then
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
speak it to me. But if you're speaking, there has to be some kind of style to it. Either you're giving a speech, like Mandela. A lot of Mandela's arias or solos are speeches that he
Just
gave.
yeah.
Um, and so it's got to be something that you're passionate about. Either you're passionately in love, or you want to kill somebody, or you hate the fucking yuppies, as
Yeah.
that's Luce's.
Yeah.
Or you're passionate about yourself, like the RuPaul character. His name is
Mm.
Guillaume. He is he's taken the stage. I mean, so
Yeah.
he's baroque. It's like a baroque castrati. He's like Farinelli. So
Oh, nice.
that's that character. Which and so they, I've got to have um, big emotions,
Yeah.
and the story has to has to have those. Um,
Mm,
so that's what I'm looking for.
amazing. And as far as the theme or the source material, it
Hmm.
really is, it sounds like it's based on people and
Yeah,
events. You were very drawn to specific people. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. I mean, I've done, Joan Ross Sorkin approached me about adapting the novel Strange Fruit by Lillian
Mm,
Smith,
hmm.
which is not based at all on the Billie Holiday song. In fact, she didn't name the
Mm.
novel that. Her publisher changed the name of the novel to
Oh.
in order to kind of ride the coattails of the Billie
Mm,
Holiday song. So that's the only work I've ever done that's based on a, a work of fiction.
hmm, hmm.
Um, every I just the historical characters themselves are, if they're passionate and important, their lives are,
Yeah.
if their lives are about big ideas
Mm,
and things, someone like Mandela or Fannie Lou Hamer,
yeah.
or Bobby Kennedy, that's what, because I'm interested in history and I'm interested in those biographies. I love those.
Yeah.
Their life. I want to find the arc, the grand arc of their life, and share it.
Mm, I love that. That's beautiful. And I feel
Yeah,
like a lot of the people that you've chosen m might not be in the public eye as much. You don't choose the most popular people to showcase in your operas. So
right.
oftentimes you are showcasing someone that we might not know, which is amazing.
Right. Well, that's why with Fannie Lou Hamer was interesting. By the way, this past weekend, President Biden gave out presidential awards. Fannie Lou Hamer and Bobby Kennedy posthumously, both of them posthumously
Mm.
were given
Oh,
awards.
really?
Yes, to give them presidential.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh, that's so interesting.
I thought, okay, well, Hillary Clinton and
Yeah.
Ralph Lauren and a bunch of others and Magic Johnson, a bunch of others got them
Yeah,
too.
yeah, 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 yeah.
They were two of 17 recipients.
Wow, wow. Two of 17.
Um,
Gosh.
two of 17 were I'd written operas. About my most recent operas, in fact. It's
All
kind
right,
of
who wants to produce these operas? It's time.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I got to how to take advantage of that. So that's another that's a task far harder than actually writing the operas. But yeah,
Absolutely.
Fannie Lou Hamer, most of my Black friends knew Fannie Lou Hamer quite well,
Mm,
but every time I would describe it to, unfortunately, my white friends, including college professors, very few of them knew had
wow.
ever Fannie Lou Hamer. And I'd known about her just from a great PBS documentary
Mm,
series from 30 years ago called Eyes on the Prize. I first learned about her there, but and she stuck in the back of my head. I've been thinking about writing, or including her in an opera,
mm,
if not necessarily writing a whole opera about her. Um, and then Santa Fe uh, promoted this Opera for All Voices commissions, and she just checked every box, and I was
mm.
like, oh, Fannie
It's
Hammer,
time.
yep. And
Yeah.
Diana, like absolutely, Diana is like totally ready to do it. So we just jumped into that. That was
Amazing.
so.
Well, I had a question about your own perception of your unique sound world. Since you do write operas specific to certain decades and times, do you tailor your compositional style to the specific time frame of the
Yes,
historical event that you were working on? Okay.
yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Um, I know that not that, yes, that's my MO.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I do is, well, with Bobby and this little lot of mine, I not only did that, I actually, because Bobby and Fannie Lou Hamer both were in in a world of newsreels, and so we have
Mm,
voices.
right.
So
Right.
I use from documentary footage and archival footage and newsreels the characters and incorporate them into the opera. As you
Wow.
know, the past 20 some years, opera world has been inundated with videography, use of video,
Mm-hmm,
um,
hmm.
and I generally like it, but um, it's all brought in from by the team that is either the video design team, the video design, and
Yeah.
I like video design
Yeah.
as for opera and seeing images. But I wanted to actually take some creative control over that,
Mm,
and also the sound of their voices, the sound of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony. Her voice itself is so powerful. So is Bobby's. So I started, and I'd heard Steve Reich wrote a piece called "The Cave" many years ago, and he worked with his wife, who was a videographer, Beryl Carot. And I love the way he used the video and took musical motives and rhythms from their speaking voices. So
yes.
that piece is just full of that. So I just use it surgically, but I insert into the opera the archival footage. You can use audio or video, and I it I've at the premiere of This Little Light of Mine, I I felt it made it much more dramatic, and
Mm,
other people felt that way too. And
yeah.
I had done a showcase of Bobby in 2015. That's where I first used the idea. And we did the first act at Symphony Space in 2015. And I just put together the the clips and hit the cues myself back in the sound room.
Yeah.
Just and it I was pleased with it, and
Yeah.
it didn't seem to me very difficult to do.
Right. Right.
So
It's really not.
um, I, I'm having a hard time convincing opera companies that this is a good idea, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, at Kentucky Opera is doing next month. They're doing This Little Light of Mine, and they don't want any audio or video.
Interesting.
So they just feel like
Maybe
it
the way
causes
of
them
the future with opera. So
I,
that's
I well, it's
great
one
option.
thing to just put it in for like the video designer
Mm,
to incorporate it at a certain point,
hmm
and just they just decide where, but it's not incorporated into the score. It's
mm,
quite another thing when it's incorporated into the score, so that the video
yes,
cue has to come on, the second eighth of beat two of this.
exactly.
That means that the tech people have to read music,
You're right.
or they have to be cued very quickly. So,
Yeah.
um, and so that's which makes it much more powerful, by the way,
Yeah.
and because it's tied to the music. But it also makes it it's a little more difficult. But
Right.
I know
Well,
how
it's
to. I
through
mean,
integration.
yes,
Yeah.
it's I I'm going to stick with it. But that's what that piece is all about.
Right.
And so that those pieces are definitely incorporated a lot. By the way, the so I'm not just incorporating that, I'm also creating this. I learned from Steve Reich that the rhythms and there's melody and rhythm, from auto
Oh,
tune,
yeah.
that there are that come from that, and also harmony. There's a key. So if you transcribe any statement that anybody says, if you transcribe it very carefully,
Yeah.
um, it has a chord to it, or a key to it. There's a
That's
tonality.
amazing.
There is a tonality to it. Now, I'm imposing it, but
Yeah.
there is an inflection,
Right. Right.
and it's got pitch to it. And whenever there's an interesting melody, or an interesting, rhythm and melody, there you can put a chord to it. And so that became that's the basis for a lot of the music in those operas. And then, of course, the other thing is the music of the time. So for
Mm,
Bobby, there's a lot of that music that's immersed in the Rat Pack of
mm.
Frank
Yeah.
Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. in that time. And so I incorporate a lot of that for lighter music. For Fannie Lou Hamer, she's from the Mississippi Delta, so the Delta blues is just it's just chalked with that, and
Yeah.
oh, and still string guitar. So yep, that's what I like. I think audiences love that
I
because it's
think that's
music very
amazing.
familiar to you, and it can be shaped dramatically.
Mm.
So you just have to know how to do it. But that's what I like the sound of that music, and I immerse myself. It's a pleasure to write it. Um, and yeah, that's how I do it. That's how I'm.
That is such an amazing place to start and to come from in composition, I think, where you are literally transcribing someone's voice,
Yeah.
the voice of your primary character, and then also adding in the music of the times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by the way, so
Wow.
Luce's song, as I said, her character, Sinead O'Connor, is an
Right.
inspiration for her character.
Yeah.
So I there's Sinead O'Connor in that, um, and specifically in that.
Hmm.
So
You
for
listened
the
to her voice and added in.
absolutely, and also I listened to
Okay.
just
Okay.
specific and stole some
Yeah.
licks
Yeah.
and some progressions and just made them my own. So
Amazing. I think we have around 3.5 minutes left, though I really wish we had far more time to discuss this in detail because I'm so fascinated by this type of compositional process. So I'm trying to decide which question to end on. Um, is there an upcoming project that you can share more about, or a historical event that you're hoping to explore in the future? Mm, one that's percolating?
well, my God, I have things. Well, I've got, this, I've just gotten started on the whole world. So we still have to really bring that one to bear. I've
Mm.
got at least two other operas that are stuck way in the back of my head. Um, one of which, my partner is Armenian, and there's a, a fascinating composer named Gomidas. He's basically the father of Armenian music.
Mm. Okay.
He was both a composer. He's kind of like Bartok. He was both a composer and a ethnographer, and took down.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And it's, of course, the Armenian community. He was living around the turn of the 20th century, and through the genocide, and experienced the genocide, and did much to preserve the culture
Mm.
of Armenian music before so many people died.
Yeah.
So that's one person's life that I'm drawn to. And the other person's life, I've done all these things that are outside of my world. Of
Mm.
course, I'm just from Eastern North Carolina, from the Son of Provinces, so there's nothing much interesting. Though there is one story I might like to tell, and that's the story of A.P. Carter and the Carter family. Um, who are her um, they're uh, um, attributed as the kind of founders of country music, though
Oh,
of course what they're doing is they're gathering lots of traditional songs and just recording them.
yeah.
Um, but their story is fascinating, um, um, and uh, I I think it's worthy of. An opera is kind of a weird thing but their story is full of music. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It's also there's a lot of collaboration between him and a um, a black blues guitarist from that part of the world, where
Mm.
helped him collect songs, whose name has been almost entirely forgotten.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
Riddle, and uh, but in fact they were quite comfortable, and he even lived with them for a while they were collecting songs, and he's very
Wow.
much part of the found. Of course, there's nowadays we know that Black folks contributed as much to country music
Oh,
as people did,
yeah.
but for so long
It wasn't recorded.
it was not thought that people. It was not part of people's image. It's not how it marketed itself,
Yeah.
and still the Black artists have to really fight their way into it. Though they've been there the whole time, they never
Right.
were gone.
Right.
And so that's part of that story.
Mm.
So maybe one day, 10, 15,
Amazing.
20 years.
Well, I feel like that was a beautiful note to end on. So thank you so much for sharing about your compositional process, about all of your different operas, or many. I know there are some future ones that I certainly would be very excited to sing and or see on stage. And for anyone watching, check out the rest of Martial Opera's Oral History Project videos to learn more about American composers. And if you are in New York on February 28th, come to the recital of all the amazing works that are going to be performed by living composers. So thank you so much, Chandler Carter, for your time. This has been so wonderful.